You know, if I say, well, south of the border, you probably think of Mexico, but you can go a lot farther south than Mexico. You can go to South America. And that's what we're going to do on Mill Street today. We're going to start looking for a pot roast in Colombia. It has a fair amount of sugar in it, but lots of spices. It's really quite different than what we make here in the States. And then we're going to also stay in Colombia and look for a new kind of guacamole. It's very different than the Mexican version. And then we're going to travel down to Peru, where there's a large Chinese cultural influence, to do a dish called lomo saltado. It's a stir fry, of course, but it also has beef, cumin, and tomatoes in it. So today on Milk Street, please stay tuned, we're traveling to South America.
Funding for this series was provided by the following.
Ferguson's proud to support Milk Street and Culinary Crusaders everywhere. For more information on our extensive collection of kitchen products, we're on the web at fergusonshowrooms.com.
For 25 years, Consumer Cellular's goal has been to provide wireless service that helps people communicate and connect. We offer a variety of no-contract plans, and our U.S.-based customer service team can help find one that fits you. To learn more, visit consumercellular.tv.
Cooking happens in the kitchen, but life happens around the kitchen table. The 1919 collection, celebrating yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Visit us at www.1919cookware.com.
You know, lots of people think that all pot roasts are created equal. Well, it just ain't true. Now, we know this because we went down to Cartagena in Colombia. Now, this is a city known for its sweet tooth. Lots of candy vendors, bright red sodas, lots of fizz and sugar. And they actually use sugar in their savory cooking. They use something called panela, which is an unrefined brown sugar. Now, one of the dishes that they do that with is posta negra, which is essentially pot roast. Now, we visited a local cook, Carmen Herrera, and she showed us how to make it. You take a roast, of course, and you do a marinade with red wine, some of that panela sugar, spices, etc., for about 24 hours. Take it out, sear it, and then braise it in that marinade. And you cook down to a really nice sauce. Now, the sauce isn't as thick as traditional, let's say, Kansas City barbecue. It has a little more depth and background to it. It's not quite as tomatoey. So today on Mill Street, we're going to make an all-new pot roast from Colombia, Posta Negra. So now it's time to do it and not talk about it.
So for Posta Negra, the sauce is about as important as the meat it braises. So we really focused our efforts on trying to mimic what we saw in Cartagena. It was sweet, but tangy, and really rich. So we are gonna work on our meat, but we're not gonna do a whole lot to it. It's really just gonna get seasoned with salt and pepper. All of the effort we're putting into the flavor here is gonna be in that sauce.
Okay.
So the first thing we want to do when you get your roast, which this is a 5-pound boneless beef chuck roast, is trim it of any exterior fat or excessive fat. We do want to tie our roast because it has so much fat. As it cooks, that's going to melt down and then the roast is kind of going to fall apart.
Right.
So we're going to tie it up and make sure that it's nice and tidy. Okay. So now I'm just going to season this with salt and pepper, and you want to do this generously, and then we'll come back and we'll start the base of this really flavorful sauce.
Okay.
So Chris, we're going to start building that really flavorful sauce by cooking some aromatics. That's 1 large yellow onion that's just chopped, and a half a teaspoon of salt. And that's just going to cook over medium-high heat for about 5 or 6 minutes until it's nice and brown. Okay, Chris, we've got some nice browning on these onions. So now I'm gonna add some garlic. This is 10 cloves of garlic. They're whole, we've just peeled them. Cook this for about 30 seconds. You just wanna kind of smell that garlic. And then I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. I'm gonna cook this for 2 minutes. Seems like a really long time, but we're trying to get this nice and brown, because that's gonna give us that really concentrated tomato flavor. So here's where things are going to start to get interesting. I have a half a cup of dark brown sugar. So that sounds like a lot of sugar, but it's really not going to be.
No, it actually is a lot of sugar. So that sounds like a lot.
I know, but this is kind of a sweet sauce. That's kind of its hallmark. So much like a Southern barbecue sauce is sweet, and you eat that with meat, that's kind of the same thing here. So then we're going to add some warm spices. So I have 2 cinnamon sticks, 1 tablespoon of whole allspice, 2 teaspoons of peppercorns, and 1 teaspoon of whole cloves. So this is very different than what you would normally make in an American pot roast. These warm spices would probably not show up. To that, I'm going to add 1 cup of dry red wine. Some people use other liquids that they think are sort of the secret complex flavor here.
Cola.
Cola is one. There's also a soda in Cartagena that's like a super sweet vanilla soda that people think is really important. So I'm going to let this cook for about 3 to 5 minutes, just until it's thick and syrupy. So our wine is nice and syrupy, and this is where the interesting ingredients come in that is going to really mimic that complex flavor that we had in Cartagena. Sometimes people use cola, sometimes they use that really special soda from the city. Some modern chefs use tamarind to do that, to find that flavor, that sweet and sour flavor, which is a little bit hard to find. So instead, we're using 2 different ingredients. 1/4 cup of Worcestershire. Worcestershire's got that sweet and tangy flavor. It also actually has tamarind in it. And then we're using 1 cup of chopped dried prunes, and it really adds that kind of caramel sweetness that we were going for. It's going to break down and melt into that sauce, and it's really going to give it that smooth viscosity. Okay, so now we need to add the meat. You really want to coat the meat with this really flavorful sauce. It's also going to give it that nice kind of caramel color. So we're going to cover, and I'm going to put this in a 300-degree oven. It's going to stay in there for 3.5 hours. You don't really have to address it at all once it's in there. It's all hands-off cooking, so you just put it in, leave it, and then you come back and it's nice and tender.
My kind of cooking.
All right. So Chris, if you wouldn't mind stepping over here with me, we're going to make an accompaniment to this, a nice pico de gallo to go with it. These really bright flavors are really nice with that sweet, rich sauce. So really simple. We have 3 plum tomatoes. We've cored them, we've seeded them, and chopped them pretty fine. And then 1 jalapeno. We took the seeds and the ribs out.
You did that for me, right? Thank you.
And this is 3 tablespoons of red wine vinegar, 2 tablespoons of chopped cilantro, and 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt.
This is a big slab of meat. You got the sugar, you have the prunes, you have all the other great things in that, spices. And now you're making me feel like I'm eating a little salad here with the pico de gallo, right?
It'll be really nice with this, I promise.
Psychologically, it's
Gonna highlight some of that tang that's in there. It's really good. All right, we're just gonna let this sit, and then we'll have it later with the roast. So Chris, our roast is nice and tender. It's been resting over there for about 30 minutes. You really wanna make sure that this roast rests. Otherwise, it's gonna make it really hard to carve. So I took the solids from this sauce and strained them through a fine mesh strainer. When you're doing that, you really want to scrape the bottom of the strainer so you get that pulp that we talked about, because that's really going to give this sauce a lot of body. So we let that sit, and then took the fat off the top, and now this is the beautiful.
Voila. There we are.
I mean, it doesn't look amazing.
It does look amazing.
So I'm going to add this into this pot. You can use the same pot that you just took everything out of. We're going to bring this up to a simmer. And so then I'm going to mix together 3 tablespoons of water and a tablespoon of cornstarch. So we're going to put this into our sauce. It's just going to thicken it up a little bit. When you add a slurry, you want to whisk it constantly. And while I'm whisking away over here, if you could be helpful and carve our beautiful roast. Just going to cook this for about 2 more minutes. So the sauce is nice and thick. I'm just going to turn the heat off and then add 3 tablespoons of red wine vinegar.
Meat, sauce, the 2 should get together.
They are just about to. You did a really nice job on the carving.
Well, it's like pot roast. It's very tender. It's a little tricky to carve. You have to have a very sharp knife because it will fall apart on you.
Right, because it's so tender. I'm going to get some of this sauce. Just going to put the rest of this in a little bowl here in case we need any more, because it's really, like I said, all about the sauce here. If you wouldn't mind serving up some meat.
Here we are. A healthy amount for you.
Thank you. I'm going to put a little extra, no surprise, on mine.
Is there a little salad on the side? There you are. Oh, this reminds me of Texas brisket. You're right, that is bright. It's sweet, but it's not super sweet because
No.
it has lots of other things in it, like Worcestershire. It has depth.
Such a nice balance.
So, as we said, this is essentially pot roast, but it's Colombian pot roast from Cartagena. The notion, of course, is the sauce, and it has some unusual ingredients, including those healthy prunes you put in it. But it has a very rich, deep sauce, lots of brown sugar, but it's not just sweet, it's sweet with lots of other things going on. It really makes a terrific dish. And on the side, pico de gallo, which, you're right, it's perky, and it's a nice complement to the meat, so it's terrific. So, Posta Negra, the new way to do pot roast here at Mill Street. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And now I'm going to finish the whole thing. Well, it's true, there's not just one recipe for guacamole. It's all over Central and South America. So we went to Colombia to track down a very particular recipe that had very bright flavor to it, also some hard-cooked egg in it. So we went to Cartagena, and it turns out nobody knew what we were talking about until the last place we went, and that person actually had heard of the recipe and knew how to make it. Turns out it's more of a Bogota specialty than Cartagena. In any case, Josh is here to help us make this version of guacamole. Again, very bright, but also a little bit of egg in it as well.
This version of guacamole is not actually guacamole. It is a Colombian ají de aguacate, which means pepper of avocado.
I'm glad you had to say that instead of me, because you did it a lot better than I would do it.
So the reason it's different is it actually starts out with what's essentially a chili relish. And in this recipe, we use fresh chilies for their brightness as well as their subtle heat. And that actually contrasts the cool richness of avocado. So let's go ahead and get started with the chili relish here. Now, to a food processor, we'll go ahead and add about 6 scallions cut up into 1-inch pieces, as well as 2 Anaheim chilies. Now, Anaheim chilies are the long, large green chilies that don't have a lot of heat to them. In fact, the heat in this recipe is coming from the habanero. Now, if you prefer something that's a little on the milder side, feel free to use half of the habanero or omit it altogether. But
Just remember that note to self, omit altogether. Okay.
What, you don't like it spicy?
No, I like spicy, but I don't like really hot.
Okay, well, we put the whole habanero in
Okay,
there, so
so-
have fun. But either way, we'll go ahead and break that down. Beautiful. So now that all of the chilies and scallions have been chopped up, we'll now add 1.25 cups of fresh cilantro. And we'll want to break that down first just to make sure that it really permeates the entire relish here. So I'll give this a couple pulses. Excellent. Now to this.
No, this is going to be done faster than the time it takes me to say guacamole.
Exactly.
You're quick.
To the processor, we've added 2 tablespoons of white vinegar as well as 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And this is really what makes this the relish that it is. Now that settles it for our chili relish. It's really more of a cilantro chili mixture at this point. Now let's get back to the part that looks like guacamole. This is probably what's making us all think that it's guacamole. In this bowl, I have 2 halves of 1 avocado, and I'm going to add about 1 hard-cooked egg. This egg adds a little bit of richness and some fun texture to this sauce. We're just going to mash it up until it's fairly smooth, and I'm using the back of a fork to help me do that. You could do this in a food processor, but sometimes it gets a little watery. In fact, if you're using avocados that are too ripe, that are soft to the touch, you will end up with a thin, watery salsa, and that's not what we're looking for. So what you're really aiming for is an avocado that only gives a little bit when pressed. All right. So now that that is fully mixed, we'll go ahead and add in the remaining 4 avocado halves into this bowl. And we'll actually gently fold that in with about 2 tablespoons of lime juice. So we're actually getting a double hit of brightness and acidity, not only from the vinegar that's in the cilantro chili mixture, but also the lime juice that we've just introduced to this avocado. So now that that is well folded in, we'll go ahead and add in the remaining chopped egg.
So there are 2 eggs total?
There are 3 eggs in this.
Okay.
And we'll also add in the chopped tomato. Now, I pulled out about 2 tablespoons of both of those components, the egg and the tomato, to go ahead and put on top, so that way people know exactly what's in this salsa. But now that everything's in, give it a good fold. We'll then add our cilantro chili mixture. So you notice the color of this relish, and it's quite a loose relish, and that's really going to give us more of a fluid sense to this salsa. Now that we folded in that chili cilantro mixture, we're all set to eat. So all we have to do is transfer it into our serving bowl. And you notice all the different colors going on here, but we're gonna give that one more pop. Top it off with a little bit of the tomato. And finally, some of the egg as well. It's not common that you find egg in a salsa like this, so this will really get everyone very interested in what exactly they're about to eat. With the garnishes on top of this ají de aguacate, we're ready to eat.
It sounds good and it looks great, but
Thank
now
you.
we got to taste it.
Yeah, let's give it a shot. What do you think?
Man, that's a surprise because it has a little heat, but it's really bright. You know, a lot of guacamole is like, kind of like it ends in your mouth and doesn't go anywhere. This is really good, yeah.
Yeah, it's not nearly as heavy thanks to that acidity. It really does contrast that richness, that decadence that avocado comes with. I love it.
The pepper sauce itself is looser and brighter. It's not just all avocado.
Yeah.
You know, it's really good. So you may call this Colombian avocado salsa. I would call it guacamole. But of course, I'd be wrong. In any case, no matter what you call it, it is delicious. I'll eat it all. You don't have to eat any of it. I don't know.
I made it for you, Chris.
Oh, good. Thank you. You know, one of our editors was in Peru recently and discovered there are lots of different cultures there, which make a really interesting set of cuisines. A lot of Chinese live there, also a lot of Italian influence from the late 19th century as well. So there is a chifa cuisine, which is Chinese Peruvian, which is really interesting. And one of the recipes that has been influenced by the Chinese culture is called lomo saltado. It's really a stir fry of beef, and it also uses soy sauce. So obviously it has Chinese influence, although by now lomo saltado is really considered a traditional Peruvian dish. So a stir fry by way of Peru, lomo saltado. And so how do we get started?
The lomo in lomo saltado, it actually refers to tenderloin. But as you know, beef tenderloin is very expensive. And it turns out that home cooks in Peru use all different kinds of cuts for the meat. So we decided to use sirloin tips. And then we do use soy sauce, which is, you know, one of the key ingredients that is in every version of the recipe. But in Peru, they tend to use ají chilies, which are yellow and kind of fruity. And unfortunately, we can't find those here. So we're gonna use jalapeno for a similar effect. But to get started, we're just gonna do a really simple, strong and quick marinade, so it only takes about 10 minutes. We have 1.5 teaspoons of ground cumin, and then a teaspoon each of salt and pepper, and we have 2 tablespoons of soy sauce. And we're actually gonna use more soy sauce later. That gives it a lot of kind of savory depth. And because there's nothing to dilute the salt and the seasonings here, you only want to let this sit for about 10 minutes. So it's really the perfect amount of time to just get your other ingredients prepped. And by the time you're ready to go and everything's chopped, it's ready to be patted dry and put in the pan.
So these are sirloin tips, and you cut them in, what, 1 or 2 inch squares? Or how do you
So what we actually do, Chris, is you want to cut it into like 3-inch pieces, and then you want to slice it against the grain. Okay, Chris, so the meat's been marinating for about 10 minutes. Now I'm just gonna pat it dry, and that's because we really don't want this meat to steam. We wanna get a nice crust when we brown it. And you can see there's not a ton of excess marinade here, but it's still really important just to take that extra step to soak up any of the excess marinade. And we have 1.5 pounds of meat here, Chris, so we're gonna cook it in 2 batches. It's really tempting when you're trying to get dinner on the table to do it in one, but again, we want that nice browning and not steaming. So I'm just gonna heat up a tablespoon of neutral oil here. It's gonna get a little smoky because we are gonna work over high heat. So make sure that you have an oil that is, again, neutral and a really high smoke point like grapeseed. When you're waiting for the oil to come up to temperature too, it's also important to use your nose. If you're starting to smell that oil, you know it's definitely ready. And I'm starting to smell it a little bit. And that is the sizzle that we're looking for. Now, Chris, we always joke in cooking school that we need Milk Street branded straitjackets, because the hardest part is getting people to leave the meat alone. Do not futz with it, do not mix it around. You need to leave it for a good 2 minutes, flip it, make sure it's brown on the other side, and then we'll repeat it with the rest of the meat. Okay, Chris, I'm gonna go ahead and flip these. You can see that nice browning.
So we said this was a stir fry, but obviously you're not stir frying. You're just using a skillet to cook it, right?
When we're talking about stir fry, the things that we did stick with is you want to make sure all your ingredients are prepped and ready to go, and we're talking about really high heat and looking for browning. All right, I'm going to take these out of the skillet and brown the second batch. Okay, Chris, this pan is still really hot, but I'm going to add the last tablespoon of our oil, and I'm turning the heat down to about medium-high here. We don't want to scorch these onions. That's just one red onion that we've sliced up. We're just gonna give it about 2 minutes. Something that I love about this recipe, Chris, is we get the nice browning from the steak, and then that comes out of the pan, so then we can cook the vegetables just until they're kind of tender crisp and still have a bit of their integrity. So we're just looking for, again, 2 minutes, slightly softened, and then we'll go ahead and deglaze the pan. All right, Chris, you can see these are getting a little bit translucent, but they still have some bite. They're just starting to soften.
Sounds like me.
Just like you.
I'm starting to soften, but I still have bite.
Plenty of bite. So I have a 1/4 cup of red wine vinegar and the remaining 3 tablespoons of soy sauce. Remember, we already used 2 in the marinade. And that vinegar is really gonna kind of cut through that salty bite really nicely. And we just want this to reduce for about 1 minute. That'll kind of take the raw vinegar taste out of it and bring out that sweetness. Chris, you can see that it's getting a little bit more viscous. So I'm gonna go ahead and add 2 minced cloves of garlic here and 1 sliced jalapeno. As soon as we can smell the garlic, then we know it's time to move on. And I gotta say, this recipe is not super spicy, but if you don't want any spice or a lot less spice, you can just take out the seeds and the jalapeno. This is just 30 seconds. Now I'm gonna add the tomatoes, and we're gonna add back in the meat and all the juices and just warm it through. So these tomatoes are gonna be barely cooked. They're still gonna be bright red and juicy and just softened a little bit. This is just 1.5 cups of tomatoes. It adds beautiful color as well as a little bit more sweetness and acidity. And I think we're ready to serve, Chris.
That was quick.
It is quick. So I should mention, Chris, we're serving this with rice, but if you were to go to Peru, it would be served not only with rice, but also with French fries. But the rice does a great job of soaking up that sauce. So I'm gonna use my tongs, but then I'm also gonna get a spoon because I wanna make sure that you get plenty of that delicious sauce for you.
Well, it sure smells good now. You're done. It has a more complex taste than I thought it would, you know?
You know, the marinade is really simple, but that combination of the cumin and then that really deep, savory soy.
No, the tomatoes are sweet. You have the onions, a little bit of the vinegar, the cumin, the soy sauce. It's fabulous. So, lomo saltado, it's from Peru. It's a classic Peruvian dish, obviously a stir fry, but it has cumin, has vinegar, onions, tomatoes. It's really an interesting dish. And you can make it on Monday night or Tuesday night or Wednesday night. Anytime you want, all you need is about half an hour. You can get the recipes from this season of Milk Street Television at milkstreettv.com.
Funding for this series was provided by the following.
Ferguson's proud to support Milk Street and Culinary Crusaders everywhere. For more information on our extensive collection of kitchen products, we're on the web at fergusonshowrooms.com.
For 25 years, Consumer Cellular has been offering no-contract wireless plans designed to help people do more of what they like. Our U.S.-based customer service team can help find a plan that fits you. To learn more, visit consumercellular.tv.
Cooking happens in the kitchen, but life happens around the kitchen table. The 1919 collection, celebrating yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Visit us at www.1919cookware.com.